Welcome to Raising Daughters, the podcast that helps parents learn the best ways to support their daughters as they navigate the high levels of stress, anxiety, pressure, and uncertainties so pervasive in our culture today. Dr. Tim Jordan is a developmental and behavioral pediatrician who has specialized in counseling girls for over 30 years and sheds light on the realities of today's young women in all facets of their lives. This is your opportunity to learn how to better support your daughters, making them feel safe, secure, and truly loved in the midst of life's ups and downs. Here is your host, Dr. Tim.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to Raising Daughters. Dr. Tim Jordan here. As a lot of you know, I'm a developmental and behavioral pediatrician, which means I'm a pediatrician and MD, but I did a 2-year fellowship in something called developmental and behavioral pediatrics a long time ago. And so I stopped doing my medical practice, 30-something years ago. And what I do now is a lot of things, but one of the things I do is I counsel girls, grade school, middle school, high school, and even in college now, in a counseling practice. I also run weekend retreats and summer camps for girls in grade school through high school. I've been doing that now for 34 years, believe it or not. So I have listened to lots of girls' stories in my office and retreats and camps, also with our school program. And so I thought I would talk today a little bit about some suggestions for some of your kids who might be graduating from high school and going off into the world. They may be going to college or somewhere else, but I think it's a good pausing time in their lives for them to kind of take stock of what have they learned about themselves up until now? Or what are some things that they want to let go of before they move on to the next leg of their journey? And what are some things they might want to reach for also in that same vein as they go into the next leg of their journey? So let's talk first about things that they might want to consider letting go. And the main thing I'm going to talk about is some old limiting beliefs that they have accumulated through their childhood up till now. And by the way, this podcast is not just going to be valuable for parents with a high school senior or even a college senior going off into the world in another way, but any kid at any level. The kind of things I'm going to talk about in this podcast, I talk about with girls all the time in my office practice and also at my retreats and my camps, as they're wrestling with the challenges that they're facing growing up. Let me give you some examples of what I mean by this. I developed years ago in our retreats and camps something I call my spiral of beliefs. And what I mean by that is that your daughters, and this is true for your sons too, by the way, but when your daughters were younger, they were these perfect little creatures. Life happens to all of us. Different challenges, adversities, hurts, all kinds of different kinds of adversities. And because of that, it elicits emotions in them. They may feel hurt or sad or scared, or they may feel disrespected or unloved or whatever. And then they start to wonder, why is this happening to me? And then they start to try and make sense of it in their minds. So thoughts start to pop in their heads about me. It's because I'm blank. I'm going to be giving you lots of examples, real life examples of girls who I've met in my counseling practice. So they start to wonder, maybe it's because I'm almost always faulty thinking, but makes sense to them as they're trying to make sense of their adversities. And then over time, those thoughts end up becoming beliefs. They believe that they're not good enough, they're not worthy, that they're not deserving, that they're unlovable, they're not important, etc., etc. And so I don't want them carrying those kind of beliefs out with them as they go out into the world. Let me give you a bunch of examples. It'll become clearer. I made up these names. Some of these are names of girls who I know, but it's not their stories. I just use their names so that when they listen to podcasts, they get excited. So one girl who I will call Deanna, when she was in middle school, she was left out of her friend group. They ditched her. And these have been her best friends since grade school. And of course, she felt excluded. She felt left out. She felt hurt. She felt sad. She felt angry. She felt confused. She had a whole range of emotions, normal emotions because of what happened. And then she went inside of her head as she started to wonder, I wonder why they're not talking to me. Why are they leaving me out? What's going on? So what the thought that she came up with in her private logic was, maybe it's because I'm weird. Maybe I'm awkward. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm socially awkward. Maybe I'm too much. Maybe I'm too little. Maybe I'm too quiet. Maybe I'm too loud. These are the kind of things that your daughters have probably been thinking about, ruminating about if they've had some struggles with friends. They worry, am I not pretty enough? Am I not popular enough or cool enough? Do I not fit? Do I not fit the mold? Do I not fit in? And those are really common beliefs that a lot of your daughters in your homes right now have inside their heads and inside their hearts. If they've not taken the time to make better sense of it, which I will talk about as I end the podcast. So for Deanna, her belief system was that she wasn't good enough. She was weird. She was awkward. Who would want to be her friend? There must be something wrong with her. And I did not want her going off to college with that belief system in her heart, because I think is pretty common sense, it would affect the way she came across. It would affect the way she would be able to attract good friends if she had those beliefs about herself. I saw a girl several years ago, and by the way, I've seen with this next story, I have seen dozens and dozens and dozens of kids with this story where school for them is hard for whatever reason. Some of the girls who I've seen where this applies have a learning disability. Maybe they have ADD or ADHD where it's hard for them. For whatever reason, they struggle in school. And some of the girls actually most of them, they work their butts off. They work really hard and they are put time in and they put the effort in, and then they eke out B's and C's, which is okay to me, right? But they look around a lot at their friends who walk into the school building, and they breathe and they get straight A's. They barely crack the books at home. They don't try very hard. If there's a paper given in class, they whip it out in 5 minutes, and these kids are struggling, a half hour later. They notice all that, and then inside their heads, they start to wonder, am I stupid? Am I dumb? When I ask girls like that who have been struggling and who will tell me about how they compare themselves unfavorably because they notice how much easier school is to their friends, I'll ask them, what does that mean about you? And almost always they'll tell me, I think it means I'm not very smart. I'm dumb. And if you extend that, what they'll say is, and therefore, I'm not going to have a very good future. Some of these girls are in grade school, middle school, and they're already worried about having a crummy life because they're struggling in school with school intelligence. I'll ask them, I've asked this question, by the way, of audiences all over the world. I've asked groups of girls in middle school, high school. I'll ask them to give themselves a grade for their IQ from 0 to 100, 0 being the lowest, 100 being the highest. So I'll say, give me a score. What's your IQ? And so everybody gives me a number. I've done this with audiences of adults, parents. Everybody gives me a number. And then once everybody has given the number, I'll say, you all failed the test. And only one time in the last 30 whatever years I've been giving talks all over the place, only one time has someone passed the test. And the reason is no one ever thinks to ask, other than one time, no one thinks to ask me an important question, which would be, what kind of intelligence are you talking about, Tim? They assume I mean school intelligence. The ability to walk into the building, sit down, shut up, pay attention, do a lot of learning by listening, auditory learning, if you will, know what's going to be on the test, be able to tell by what the teacher is saying what's going to be on the test, then be able to sit down with a multiple choice test and regurgitate it and do well. And there are some people who just aren't good at that. That's a certain kind of intelligence, right? It's not good or bad, it just is. But I'll ask these kids, what other kinds of intelligences are there besides that? And then a lot of them look at me at first with a kind of quizzical look, like, what do you mean? I'll say, there's lots of different kinds of intelligences. And then we flesh out things like somebody who's good at problem solving, somebody who has common sense, street smarts, good social or people skills. Those are incredibly important kinds of intelligences. People are good with their hands, good at putting things together. people who have one of those engineering kind of minds where they can tell how things work. People have intelligences when it comes to things like music, dance, creativity, original thought, art, drawing, singing, dancing. There's all kinds of intelligences that are really important, but we so over focus on the school intelligence to the detriment of those kids where that's one of their weak areas. So I don't want them to believe that they're not smart, they're stupid, and they have a crummy future ahead of them, but they're going to need to do some reframing. A couple more examples of some spiral beliefs I've had with girls along the way. One of the girls who I saw about a year or so ago, she felt like she had lost her mom. After her parents got divorced, her mom remarried pretty quickly, and so she started spending a lot of time with her new family. And so this girl, she was in middle school. She had two step siblings, and so she got to spend less and less and less time with her mom. And she even remembered one time sitting on her front stoop of her house. Her mom was supposed to pick her up after school on a Friday afternoon at 4:30. And so she was going to spend the weekend with her mom and her step family. And she was really excited because she hadn't seen her mom very much in the past several months. She's sitting outside she said, with my little pink suitcase, waiting. And at 4:30 came by, 4:45, 5 o'clock, 5:15. And then she started to realize she forgot. And her mom forgot that she was supposed to spend the weekend with her. This little girl was crushed. And so what she started to believe about herself was, maybe I'm not very important. I'm less important than my mom's new family. Maybe I'm not very lovable. What's wrong with me that my mom would not want to spend time with me? Those are some of the beliefs that she started to accumulate in her spiral of beliefs, if you will. I saw a girl several years ago in one of my retreats, and her parents got separated when she was, I guess, in early middle school, maybe like sixth grade. She had a younger sister as well. And her dad moved to New York, and he very quickly got a girlfriend. And then he was trying to fly home like once a month and spend the weekend with his daughters. But then once he got his new girlfriend, that became once every month and a half, once every 2 months. It started to spread out. And then his girlfriend moved in and they got pregnant. And then they had a baby. So when this girl got to go to where her dad was living, the bedroom that she had stayed in with her sister was now being used by the new baby. And the two girls were down in the basement, like in this makeshift kind of bedroom. And she was only seeing her dad about every 2 months. So she went inside her head, like, why won't my dad call? Why doesn't he remember to call me? Why doesn't he want to see me? Why am I getting to see him every so often? And what she decided about herself was kind of like the last one. Maybe my dad doesn't love me. Did I do something wrong? My new family, his new family is more important than me. But the biggest one was, my dad doesn't love me, and therefore I'm unlovable. I saw a girl one time who had a really tough childhood. When she was little, like around 2, her parents got separated and then finally divorced. And her dad had been abusive to her mom. She had witnessed some domestic violence when she was a little girl. I think she was maybe 3 when her parents finally split. And once her dad left, he rarely saw her. So that was a big, big hole in her life. Then her mom became physically abusive, would spank her, hit her with a belt, and it was mean stuff. And she described these scenes, and the mom corroborated those. They were really awful. So here's this girl who doesn't have a dad in her life, whose dad just sort of ditched her. She's got a mom who's abusive to her. And so she started to get, obviously had lots of emotions. She felt angry, she felt hurt, she felt controlled, she felt sad, she felt lonely, she felt unwanted, she felt unloved. And this girl, by the way, had a fiery spirit, and she did not like to give in to people. She did not like to be overpowered, if you will. Her mom used to lay her down in the bed, and she'd make her pull her pants down, and she would threaten to spank her with a belt. And if this girl moved an inch, she would get a double. If she moved again, she would get it again. If she cried out, she would get it again. And this girl would stick out that lower lip and, like, hit me with your best shot. So she got a lot of it, a lot of the abuse in that house. So she started to wonder, number one, I'm a bad kid. I'm never do anything right. My mom doesn't love me. My dad obviously doesn't love me. He left me, so there must be something wrong with me. I think I'm crazy because I've got all these crazy people around me, and my mom is hitting me, and my dad has left me. I have all these intense emotions I don't know what to do with. She started doing some cutting. She started smoking pot when she was in seventh grade. So then she got caught with that. Then she was sent to a residential place. Trouble, trouble, trouble. So I'm this troubled, bad, you know, disappointment kid. And it's my fault. She blamed herself for all of that. She felt ashamed of her family. Think about what that girl was carrying around with her in her spiral of beliefs. And then she started to wonder, who would want to be my friend? I'm such an awful person. I'm ashamed of myself. I'm a bad kid. All I do is make mistakes and get in trouble and disappoint people. So who would want to be my friend? Who would ever want to date me? I mean, even my dad, who's supposed to love me, he left me. So she had huge trust issues as well from all of that, as you can imagine. Another girl, I'll give you a couple more examples. Another girl who I saw several years ago, she was adopted when she was a baby from another country, a very impoverished country. And her mom had like four kids, and there, I think, four kids under five, and she, living in very poor conditions. And so she put two of the four kids up for adoption, including the girl who I had met. And she kept two of the kids with her. So this girl, when I saw her, was in early high school, and she started wondering about her mom and her family. She had never been able to be in touch with them. And she started wondering I wonder why my mom gave me up. She had heard that her mom had kept two of the kids, and she wondered why did she keep those two of my siblings, and why did she, let me and my other sibling go? Maybe there was something wrong with me as a baby. Was I a bad baby? Was I ugly? Was there something wrong with me? Was I unlovable? Is that why she gave up on me? So she had been carrying those feelings around with her for a long time, and she wanted some answers. And one of the ways she got some answers was she did a service trip later in high school to the country that she was from. And she got a chance to do some service work in a small little village, kind of like the one she could have grown up in. And she saw what would have become of her if she had stayed, which gave her a couple of things. Number one, it gave her a whole plethora. She had so much emotions from that trip. She came in to see me because she needed some help putting it all together. Just so many conflicting emotions about gratitude, happiness, but also sadness and despair and wondering and questioning. Um, but she still was carrying around with her this sense of there must have been something wrong with me. Otherwise, my mom would have kept me like she did my other two siblings. Two other quick ones. One of them was a girl, I'll call her Maggie, and she had a younger brother who had autism. And he was the kind of kid who was very hypersensitive, and he would lose it all his life. Major temper tantrums as a little kid, and those temper tantrums did not go away to the point where when she was in high school, she would get called down to the office to come quiet her brother down. So she felt responsible for him her whole life. And her parents were exhausted, trying to take care of him. As he got into the teen years, he started getting more violent. There were several times where they had to call the police to come calm him down. He went to some residential homes for a couple of different 3-month stints because he was so out of control. So this girl, some of the thoughts that came up in her head were, my brother's needs are more important than mine. And also, eventually, maybe I shouldn't even have needs. She started to develop a belief system through her spiral beliefs that said, other people's feelings are more important than mine. I should put other people's needs before mine, and I shouldn't even have needs. And this girl was having a very hard time taking care of herself because she always put herself last. And she was an incredible kid. A lot of these kids who grow up with siblings like that end up being very mature, responsible. They grew up fast. And sometimes we don't notice the part about what about me? Almost all those kinds of kids will have that question in their minds, what about me? What about my feelings? What about my needs? And they oftentimes don't express those because they see that their parents are on edge. Their parents have so much going on. They're so stressed out that they don't want to add one more thing to their parents' plate. So they hold on to it and they suffer. And oftentimes they look good on the outside because they're high achievers and they're mature and they're the kind of kid who becomes their friends' counselors. Sometimes they're the ones who their friends call mom because they're the ones who take care of their friends who are barfing and getting drunk on the weekends. So on the outside, they look good, but I always tell them, I said this to a girl not too long ago. I said, I see how people would probably see you as this beautiful swan swimming on the top of the water in this pretty pond. And people saying, wow, what a beautiful swan. But what they don't see underneath the water is your feet paddling like crazy and emotions inside of you that are paddling like crazy. And I've done that several times with girls, said that, and they just burst out into tears. Kind of like somebody finally sees, they see my pain. So you can imagine what those kind of belief systems might do to somebody if they carry those with them out into the world. One last one, a girl I saw, maybe 6 months ago or so. She was a tall girl, a basketball player. She was 5'11", and most of her friends were way shorter than her, and they were way thinner than her. This girl was an athlete. She wasn't overweight. She was just, a muscular big girl. And so in her mind, when they were out at parties and things, the boys would always go for her friends before her because they were smaller and they were cuter and they were prettier. And therefore, the thoughts that came up in her head were, I'm ugly. I'm the ugly duckling. I'm not very attractive because the boys don't pay much attention to me. They pay attention to my friends who obviously are way prettier and more attractive than me. And so that was very discouraging for her until her senior year under spring break. She went on vacation with a bunch of kids from her class, including those thin, pretty, attractive girls. And they were out one night. These are seniors in high school. They were at some club, and a boy who was a freshman in college, who was with his buddies from college on spring break, they started dancing, and he was attracted to her, and they hung out for a couple nights, and they talked and they hit it off, and he told her, she said something at one point to him apparently about how she'd never felt very attractive because boys thought she was too tall. And this kid said to her, he also was, I think he was 6'1", and he was a college athlete. He was a freshman in college. He said to her, I've always liked girls who are tall. And these light bulbs went off in her head like, what? A boy is okay with a tall girl? And so it's one thing for her parents. It's one thing for me. It's one thing for people to say, you're fine. It's not about you. It's about those goofy high school boys. Of course, you're going to find somebody. And high school boys will be intimidated by a taller girl, and especially a girl like her who is uber mature. She's such a cool, grounded, mature kid. Of course, some goofy, 17-year-old boy is going to have a hard time with you. It's another thing for her to embrace that. And I do not want girls to need validation from boys to feel okay about themselves. And in this case, it was a breath of fresh air for her. It's okay to like getting some validation where a boy says, I think you're really attractive. I don't want girls dependent upon that, but for this girl, it was beautiful because it helped her to reframe her beliefs about herself. Any time in your life is a good time to start reframing old experiences and old belief systems. But I think at those transition points, like leaving home after high school and going off to college or someplace, I think that's a really good time to do that. So before you leave home to go off to say to college, to take some quiet, reflective time to say, what have I started to believe about myself along the way? And to do a good introspection about what are some of the beliefs I've accumulated. I have girls do that in some of my retreats and camps. It's a really good exercise for them to sort of become aware. Awareness is so important. Awareness of what you've picked up. And then to start to think about, is it true? Is it true that my friends ditched me in middle school because I'm an idiot, because I'm awkward, because I'm not good enough? Was it true for that girl to believe that since the boys didn't date her, that it was because she was ugly and unattractive, even though it was just because she was tall and mature? Is it true that because your parents had so much energy around a sibling with autism, that meant that your needs are not important? Other people's needs are more important than yours, and that you shouldn't even have needs? Of course not. None of those beliefs that those girls were thinking about and accumulating, none of those beliefs are true. It makes sense to me why they might feel true, but they're not. So it's a good time to sit back and say, what is the moral of those stories? What do I want to take from those stories? Like the girl who had the autistic sibling. What she could have taken was my parents were on edge, and sometimes my brother had to take precedence, and of course he did, because of all his problems. That doesn't mean that my needs are important. It meant, though, that I needed to ask for what I needed sometimes if I ever felt left out. It meant that I might need to find or get my needs met with grandparents, aunts, uncles, other adults, if you will. And it also didn't have to mean that I shouldn't have needs. That's so important for me to ask for what I need, not just now, but throughout my whole life. That girl who was having a hard time in school and she thought she was stupid and she was going to have a crummy future. What it meant for her that she was working her butt off to get C's and all that, what it meant was some kinds of school intelligence were hard for her. She had some learning disabilities. And what that meant was that during those school years, it was going to be harder. And, she was not going to, quote unquote, look good. But it did not mean she was dumb or stupid. And of course, it did not mean she was going to have a crummy future. I told her she needed to start looking for stories. I gave her some examples of lots of people who are very successful in this world who have dyslexia, who struggled in school, who dropped out of school for various reasons, did not get a college education, et cetera, and they did just fine. And also to start appreciating all their other intelligences, which are far more important out in the real world than your ability to sit down and shut up and listen and regurgitate onto a multiple choice test. To having good people skills and problem solving skills and original thought and creativity, those are such important intelligences out in the real world. And most of the girls who I see have lots of those, and they have really strong other intelligences that they're not giving themselves credit for. That girl who was adopted, of course, it doesn't mean that she was not lovable. There's something wrong with her. It just meant her mom wanted her to have a better life. And she couldn't take care of 4 kids under the age of 5 in poverty. And that it was a way for her to love her daughter, to allow her to go and have a better life for herself. So whatever your kids' stories are, they might need to sit back and say, this is what I've believed up till now. Is that the truth? Is that what I want to carry with me for the rest of my life? And some of the things you've learned to believe about yourself may be healthy and maybe encouraging, but some of them are probably limiting beliefs. Those are the ones that all of your kids need to clean up. Become aware of them, rethink them, reframe them, change the narrative. Remind your daughters they are always in charge of their story. They're not in charge of what happens to them a lot of those times. All those examples I gave you, those kids didn't choose to have an abusive mother or a sibling with autism or to be adopted or any of those things. They didn't choose that, but they can choose to decide what they're going to believe about it and what they're going to take with them when they go off to college. It's so important for them to let go of any limiting beliefs and to establish some more healthy ones. Let me spend a few minutes now talking about a few things you may encourage your kids to reach for as they leave the nest and go off into the world. I tell girls all the time in my counseling practice that it's such an opportunity for them if they go to college or if they do anything, if they join the service or whatever. It's such an opportunity for them to reinvent themselves, try new things on. When I was in high school, I played a lot of sports. I played hockey, ice hockey. I played soccer my first year in high school. I played football all 4 years. I did a lot of things that were, sports related. And so when I went to college, I decided I wanted to stretch a little bit. And so in my first 2 years of college, I was in 3 plays. I had some vague thought maybe I want to be an actor someday. And so I was in 3 plays, and it was really fun. It was a whole different kinds of people. I became a theater kid for 2 years in college. And so that was one of the ways in college that I stretched myself. So I would encourage your daughters and your sons when they go off to school to not just recreate high school, One of my concerns about some kids who go to state schools in their own state where they grew up is that like half their high school goes there. And it's not wrong or bad. It's just that they have an opportunity to go there, even if there's a lot of people from their high school, they can go there and start hanging out with different kinds of people. They don't have to be in the same old club as in high school. It's so healthy for them to diversify and stretch themselves by finding new friends from different places, different kinds of people, a diverse, there's more diversity in a lot of high schools than there are, I'm sorry, in colleges than there are in high school. To push themselves to learn how to be with different kinds of people and to relate and to find out what they have in common. Try new activities. There's a young woman I've known since, probably about sixth grade. I saw her in my counseling practice and she came to some of my retreats and things. She was awesome. She was a powerhouse, very incredibly powerful. And she was one of those free spirits who liked to try things and liked to take risks. She was a tough kid to parent when she was younger. But when she went to college, one of the things that she did to stretch herself was she joined a rock climbing club. And this club in the weekends would go out into the woods with rappelling gear, and they wouldn't just rappel down little cliffs. They were doing the kind where you have to hammer in the things and have the carabiners, and you had people above you and below you who were counting on you. She did the hardcore stuff, and she loved it. She loved the adventure of it. She loved the risk taking, but she also learned to love working on a team in that way and leading people in that kind of way. Incredible experience for her that she had not had in high school. It was an incredible way for her to use all that spirit in a very positive way. Today, she owns her own company. She's a psychologist, and she has 7 therapists working under her in her company, and she keeps expanding. That's what it looks like now today I think she's a 28-year-old now or a 30-year-old. So I would encourage your kids to start having some new experiences. I talked to you before, and I will, in my show notes, put a link to a previous podcast on my dot theory. The dot theory, just in brief, you can not watch, you can, well, I guess watch and listen to the old podcast. Involves those connect the dot drawings that a lot of us had done as kids, where you'd see a picture that just had numbered dots, and you couldn't tell what it was until you started connecting dots. And once you had connected enough of them, a picture would start to emerge, and eventually, after you'd connected all the dots, it was a clown, or it was Santa Claus, it was a Christmas tree, or whatever it was. So my metaphor is that their job as young people is not to know the final picture of their life, to know what they're going to be doing when they're 50, not to know what their calling and all that stuff is when they're 15, 16, 18, 24. Their job is to be open to dots, experiences across their path they feel drawn to. Things that they're drawn to because it seems like fun, because I don't know, I just have an urge to do that, or it just seems like it's interesting, or I've always wanted to do that, for whatever your reasons are to do those experiences, like that rock climbing club that one girl did, like that service trip that girl took as a senior in high school. Those are dots. And if we just start to accumulate those kinds of experiences without doing them because someday I want to be, but just because at this moment it seems like the right thing to do, what happens is in our life is that those dots start to connect themselves. Those experiences start to connect, and eventually a picture of your life starts to emerge. Your purpose, your calling, your life, if you will. And so I think the more that your kids, when they leave the nest, when they can start accumulating more experiences, different kinds of experiences that don't seem to connect, but that eventually they'll be old enough to look back and go, it's interesting how these things start to connect. Now I see the pattern. I see now how it's all connected. They don't need to see that when they're 18 or 21 or whatever. Just trust that those dots will connect for them, and that their life, the picture of their life will start to unfold for them. Let me tell you a couple quick stories about some people who experienced some dots when they were in college and how it changed their life. There's one woman named Munaza Alam. In college, she did a field trip to this national observatory. It was high on a mountaintop in Arizona's Sonoran Desert. She was from New York City. She had never seen anything like this, but she had this inkling that would be interesting. And she had some interest in geology. And when she went out there into this desert, she said she had never seen a night sky like that. She was blown away. by the stars, all she could see. And she said, I was hooked. It inspired her to become an astronomer from a field trip dot. Stephanie Grok studied geology in college also. She developed slowly but surely this interest in rocks and volcanoes. And a professor encouraged her to do a summer program in Hawaii to study an active volcano in Kilauea. And she said when she went through that summer on this internship, she actually saw a volcano erupting, and she said it changed my life. And she decided to become a volcanologist. I think that's how you say it, studying volcanoes, all from a dot, trying something different. There's lots of people, there's lots of biographies that your daughters and sons could read about how people found their way, how they found their calling, how they found their path. A lot of times it's because they grabbed onto a dot that crossed their path, and that opened up an interest in them, an aptitude, which led to another dot, and another. Then all of a sudden, our lives unfold for us. Most people who employ young people, excuse me, out of college, what they tell me is they don't care what somebody's GPA is. They really don't care where they go to college. That's not that important to them. These are people I've met all over the world who own and run really big, successful companies. Let me tell you what they say they're looking for in young people. Almost always, number one is people skills. Can they look you in the eye? Can they collaborate? Can they work on a team? They're looking for people who can grab onto an interest and have experience grabbing onto their own autonomous interest and racing with it, going with it, and being fully engaged in something. It didn't have to be school. And most of the time it wasn't school. It could have been sports or music, or they wrote a play, or they wrote a book, or they started their own business when they were in high school. They love seeing people who grabbed onto something on their own and ran with it. They also want people who are curious learners, not like school learners, but people who like to learn, who are interested learners, because when they get done with their education and training at whatever level, and they go out into the real world with a job, they're going to have to relearn almost everything because educational fields are pretty behind. And so they say, I got to train them anyway. So I need people who are trainable and people who like to learn. And plus, almost every field now is expanding and changing so quickly. They need to keep learning because everything is changing. They also want people who are creative, who have original thought. So the more your kids can remind or learn of what's really important in life, things like street smarts, pursuing things that you love to do on your own, and having the determination to overcome obstacles and see things through and not give up, having a growth mindset, if you will, being determined. All those kinds of things are important. And it's nice if your kids can understand that college is not supposed to be about, sitting in a library day and night trying to get a 4.0 GPA. It's not wrong to get a 4.0 GPA, but there's so much more to college than that. You're also supposed to grow up. You're supposed to come of age, supposed to learn to think differently and to think more broadly, and to hang with people in a more diverse, broad sense, if you will. Learn how to cope with the normal ups and downs of life. You're not going to do that sitting in a library all night. It's not wrong to study, but there's way more than that. There's more to you than just developing, a GPA. It's also developing yourself, rethinking everything, your values and what you believe, and thinking through, what do I want? What's important to me? Who am I? How might I fit in this world? And as you keep accumulating dots, what is that telling me up till now? What might that be pointing me towards? Please encourage your kids to diversify and to reinvent themselves and to start discovering new things about themselves in their college. So let go of any old limiting beliefs that might be holding them back now and or in the future. Become aware of those old beliefs, understand why they may have believed that, reframe them, change the narrative, be in charge of that story, and make sure that they leave with healthy thoughts and beliefs about who they are and what happened to them. And take that time when you leave the nest to try new things. Grab onto any dot that crosses your path that you're drawn to, and trust that your life will unfold for you. Be open to new people, new situations, new experiences, new cultures. Try new things. It's such a fun and opportune time in your life to try new things. Most people, when they're 18, 19, aren't married, don't have 4 kids. So you have the chance to try stuff. I have one of my campers who is spending 4 months out in the ocean on a sailboat. It's like a semester at sea, and she's learning how to be in the ocean. She's interested in marine biology. What a great dot. She may not end up being a marine biologist, but it doesn't matter. She's learning so much about herself. One of my sons graduated from college and did a 2-year stint with Teach for America. He enjoyed the kids, but he was really tired and just needed a break. So he bought a backpack, and he bought a tent, and he bought a ukulele, and he bought a ticket to New Zealand. Took off, didn't know anybody there. And he was gone for, I think it was 22 months, a long time. It was his walkabout, if you will. And he went all over New Zealand. He went all over Australia. He went to Southeast Asia. He worked along the way to save more money, and then he'd travel some more, and he'd work a little bit and save money and travel some more. And I remember some people wondering to us, and he even wondered this himself along the way sometimes, like, shouldn't I be back home, like doing a normal thing, like getting a job now? Am I just being like a lazy bum? And people would say, well, he's been gone a long time. Don't you think he should come back and start, getting a real job? And we're like, are you kidding me? He's having not just the time of his life, he's having the education of his life. He's learning so much about being self-sufficient, taking care of himself, having no itinerary. He takes care of everything for himself all day long, every day. He's learning to fly by the seat of his pants and to trust himself. He's going to all these different cultures and learning about those cultures and thus learning more about himself. Encourage your kids to be open to those sorts of experiences along the way. So some things to let go of, some things to reach out towards as they're at this fork in the road as they're graduating from high school, or really at any point in their path. But I think that high school graduation time is a good time to take stock of where they've come from and where they're going towards, at least at this point in their life. Good luck to your high school grads. I hope they make some good choices about where they're going next year and what they're doing on this next part of their journey. For your parenting journey, I'll be back here in a week with a brand new podcast on another topic. I appreciate you stopping by every week, and I will see you back here in a week. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Raising Daughters. Hopefully you've learned something useful about girls and young women and how to help them navigate the pressures, challenges, and opportunities of modern life. If you want to become a more effective parent, keep listening to the show at drtimjordan.com and let the conversations shape you. Build that one-of-a-kind connection with your daughters in the most profound and meaningful ways possible, shaping them into strong, confident women of the future. That's all for now. See you next week for another episode of Raising Daughters.